Okay, Deborah, we're live, so you can admit people now.
Okay, we've got people joining.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Leslie Kirby, and I'm the chair of the Community Relations Committee through the Jewish Federation and Jewish Foundation of Middle Tennessee. We're co-sponsored by the Nashville Jewish Social Justice Roundtable. Our topic for today is going to be voting, but with a different take on it. So there's a new program that the Temple is participating in, and they're going to be talking with us about that program and how we can all get more involved. So we have with us today Denise Alper, Debbie Gould, Renee Kassman, and Pat Snyder. And Denise, I think you're going to start us off by talking about 4 questions about voting.
Hi, everyone. I can't really see who else on the call. Hopefully a lot of friends and some new friends to be. With us being in the midst of this plague, I have thought about Passover. And as you know, Passover being the celebration of our freedom. Well, until this year, I didn't realize how many of our freedoms I took for granted. And now that they've been restricted, that may be one of the reasons why I am just drilling down on the right that we do have, which is to vote. So even though I am not the youngest person on this call, I am going to ask 4 questions. And I would imagine most people are experienced Zoomers, but just in case you are not, after I ask the question, if you put your cursor down at the bottom of the Zoom screen, you'll see an icon that says chat. And the box will pull up, and that's where you can answer the questions. And don't be shy. This is low key, okay? So to begin, the first question, all these questions are about voting, trivia, but not trivial, okay? I am 18 and I just left for college. I forgot to register to vote before I left town. What do I need to do to request an absentee ballot in order to vote in Tennessee? So again, I'm 18, I've left for college, I forgot to vote. I want to vote in Tennessee. So what do I need to do to get an absentee ballot? We have one answer.
Type your answers in the chat and then we're going to summarize them. Okay, so far we have 2 people that say you have to vote in person the first time and 2 who say you can get the absentee ballot by submitting an application. And Debbie gave us vote in your college town.
Let's get a few more answers and then we'll go to question number 2. Not everyone likes to play games like I do, apparently. Okay, I'm going to ask the second question. We just had a really important primary earlier this month. What percentage of eligible voters in Davidson County voted in that August primary? This is for Davidson County. What percentage of eligible voters voted?
So far we're ranging from 12 to 60%.
I think what I'll do, I'll go ahead and give the answer. For that, it was about 26%. So really only 1 in 4 eligible voters in Davidson County voted. And for the first question, if you have never voted in Davidson County before, you have to vote in person. So that college student would have to come back to Davidson County, which is highly unlikely, given probably what the rules at college are right now about quarantining. And so they're not eligible for an absentee ballot unless they're not eligible for the ballot, but because they must vote in person. All right, question number.
Sorry, before you go on, you said Davidson County, but that's Tennessee state law, right? So that would be for anyone regardless of Davidson. They don't have to be in Davidson. So if they're in Williamson County, for example, that policy is the same.
I'm going to defer. Debbie Gould is probably the most experienced person of our group in terms of the ins and outs. So Debbie, I don't know what the rules are in Williamson County versus Putnam.
Okay. The rules are these are statewide rules, but each county controls their own database. So it only works, so it's county by county database as to how they handle it, but the rules are the same. If that college student wanted to vote absentee the first time, but was too late, they would have to go back sometime before the election to verify in their own county that they had the correct ID. Highly unlikely that's going to happen.
Okay, question number 3. I requested an absentee ballot, but it never came. Can I go to the polling place on election day and vote anyway? So I requested it, it did not come. Okay, the answer to that is, and most people got this right, yes. If your ballot did not come in the mail before election day, you may show up at your polling place and vote, but your vote will go into a provisional bag until the Election Commission has a chance to make sure you're not double voting. So yes, show up. And number 4, how can I be sure my voter registration is all in order? Okay, I am going to post a direct link. So after this call is finished, you can, it's in the chat box. You can go to that link and you can look up your polling place, the status of your registration, which in these crazy times, I would think everybody should make sure they're ready to vote.
Thank you for sharing with us the 4 questions. And now I think we're going to shift to Pat and talk about why the Temple decided to do this campaign.
Right. Thanks, Leslie. So I'm just going to continue with Denise's Passover theme and say that the wise woman asked, why on this year are we making such a push for people to vote? Well, this year, RAC asked all Reform congregations to join their Get Out the Vote drive. And that drive is to get 100% of eligible members to sign a pledge card to register that they will register to vote and they will actually show up in November and vote. There are 4 main reasons why we decided that it was important for us to participate. And I want to make clear that it has nothing to do with who is on the ballot, because this campaign is strictly nonpartisan. And I want to make that very clear. So anyone can feel comfortable using it. Well, the first answer to the reason why we said yes to this or thought it was important to participate is obviously COVID. I mean, let's face it, it's not going to be the same as it has been in past years. People are really going to have to make a bigger effort than they have in the past to vote. I don't know about you, but in the past, I just decide when I'm going to early vote. I look at my schedule for the day, and I go, and if the line is long, I come back later. It's really a little bit spur of the moment, but I don't have a real plan. And the same thing if I were to choose to wait until election day. You just go when your schedule permits. Well, everybody might not feel comfortable doing that this year, and they might just say it's too much of a hassle. So we think it's important to make sure everybody has a plan to vote. And so they know what they're going to do, when they're going to do it, whether it's absentee, early voting, or on the day, and that they feel safe. So that's the obvious answer as to why we think or thought it was important to join the campaign. The second reason is that historically, Tennessee really has a problem getting out, getting people to the polls. Tennessee is actually ranked second to the last in the nation for voter turnout, and we're nearly as bad when it comes to voter registration. So you heard Denise say that 26% of the eligible voters voted in the primary. Well, here's another piece of information that I thought was pretty scary. You know how much Nashville has grown in the last 5 years. Well, think about how much it has grown since 1971. We actually had more people voting in 1971 than we do today. To me, that is, well, it's embarrassing and it's scary. The third reason that we chose to get involved is that, as we've already found with some of the answers, the voting rules are confusing at best, and particularly this year and particularly in Tennessee. I'm not even going to try to get into all the reasons it's so confusing. Debbie will talk about that later, but let's just say at best it's complicated. And then the fourth reason we decided it was important is really one of our future. I mean, voter turnout among young Americans has been dismal since 1971, when the 26th Amendment was passed and 18-year-olds got the right to vote. Even in the last presidential election, 2016, which was a huge year for young people to vote, only 3 in 10 of those young people voted. And it's not unusual in a presidential or even a midterm election to see older voters voting at twice the rate as the younger voters. And this year, going back to COVID, what makes it even worse or scarier is that high school voting registration for students who are turning 18 didn't happen because of COVID. So I don't know if you even think about this, but for me, voting is a habit. I've been doing it since I was 18. And we need to get the young people in the habit of voting, because democracy as we know it will look very different if they don't start turning out. So those are the reasons that we said it's important for us to get involved in this campaign. So then we started the fun part of it, which is developing the campaign. And as we started talking about it, we knew that because we wanted it to be nonpartisan, we wanted to make sure it didn't look political. So we said no red, white, and blue. We thought about a traditional marketing campaign. What's important about it? Well, it needs to be memorable. It needs to stand out among other messages that people are seeing. And then we thought about our audience, which is, in our case, the Jewish community in the temple, and thought, well, you know, what Jew doesn't relate to a good Jewish humor? So for those of you who have not heard about the campaign or what it is, we're just going to introduce it with a short video, and then I'll give you specifics about how we're getting the campaign out to everyone. So we can start that video now. All right, so that's the campaign. Not voting is not kosher. And we have a lot of different graphics packages that people can use that we'll talk about later. But we want to start off with talking about the main goal, which is going back to what RAC's main goal is, and that is to make sure that people sign the pledge card. So that pledge card is really one of the most important parts of the campaign. And I'm going to turn it back to Denise to talk about it, because she did just an incredible job of developing that electronic voting pledge card and getting it up so that people can use it. Denise?
I have to laugh. I did an incredible job for someone of my age, okay? It's really a no-brainer. Okay, Nicole, can you put, all right. So okay. This, basically, we will push people at the temple to this pledge card. There's a postcard that's going out that will have the link on it, and in our emails, so people will know about this at the temple. The goal, getting 100% to sign it. So the first thing is, for those who haven't registered, they pledge to register, and the link takes them directly to it. Scroll down, the voter pledge. You either pledge to vote in the November election and to verify that your registration is valid, like you guys are going to do after this call. And the third is you pledge to help turn out your family and friends to vote. And don't underestimate the exponential power of you talking to your friends. All right, then the voter plan. The behavioral scientists say that if you have a plan to vote, you're 5 times more likely to actually go out and do it. So you either decide, I'm going to plan to vote on election day, November 3rd, or during early voting, which is October 14th through the 29th, or you plan to vote by absentee. And those ballots are available now, so this will take you right to that ballot. We do ask for people's names, and then they have the option, if some people would like help with the absentee ballot process because it can be confusing, they check that. And then we ask if we don't know if we will, but if we can use their names, if we start listing everybody who's participated, and then their email and their comments. And the point about this form is it is so easy. If someone from another congregation wants to use it, I'm happy with my newfound knowledge to tailor it to your needs, including if you don't want to use not voting is not kosher, we can put a different picture up there. So, and what's nice about this form is that I get a notice every time somebody submits it, and it all automatically loads into a spreadsheet, so I can look at those people who say they want help with the absentee ballot, or sort it however we want to for further outreach.
Okay, thanks, Denise. It really is easy to use because I have already signed up, or Denise would have shot me if I hadn't done it by now. So let's talk about how we are going to get the word out about the campaign. As Denise said, the best way to get people to do something is by a friend. So we have a goal of making contact with each member at least 3 times over the next 2.5 months. We're targeting all members, but we're going to be working especially hard to get those 18 to 40-year-olds to vote and sign that pledge card, because we think that these are the least likely to actually turn out. And quite honestly, they're the hardest people for us to reach. So we're going to go to that friend to friend. I got involved in this because Denise is a friend and she picked up the phone and said, there's going to be a Zoom call tomorrow about this RAC campaign. Will you join the Zoom call? So I said, yes. So we're taking that model of peer-to-peer communications, and we're in the process of selecting leaders in different age groups. So between that 18 and 40, so maybe 18 to 20, 20 to 25, et cetera. And we've put out from the rabbis an email asking people if they will join the campaign. And then once we have those leaders, and leaders are just, we know that who's active and who's got a big network. And so there's no way to do this for us to tell you how to identify that. But once we do that, we'll have a training Zoom call with them, and we will give them the messages that we want them to get out, which is primarily, we want you to sign this pledge card, and then we want you to follow up and actually vote, register and vote. So once we do that, it's up to them. They can reach their network however they normally talk to their network. So, younger people text, older people are more comfortable with email. So whatever it is, that is how it's going to happen. And so we've started this campaign, which some people might feel is pretty early, but we've started it because organizing all these people, grassroots, if you will, takes a long time. And that is the main way that we are going to get out the message, or really motivate people. We got a lot of ways to get out the message, but we think that's what's going to motivate people. So we're going to kick this off, as the little video said, on the 21st, and that's going to happen at the Zoom Shabbat with the rabbis announcing it. But this Friday is Suffragette Shabbat, and so they're going to do a little teaser about that. So we're also going to be changing up the look of, we're going to have messages on all the regular temple communications, so bulletins, whatever. And we're going to try to make sure that we change the look of that so people just don't gloss over once they've seen it once or twice. So to really change the wording and the graphics. So if I can have the next slide. We're also going to be using our Facebook page, and we're going to be using social media. And our graphics designer has given us the graphics in appropriate sizes so that they're easy to use. And you see a little bit of those there. And we are happy to share these with you. The other thing, our graphic designer was a volunteer person, and her name is Caitlin Mello, and she is just fabulous. And she is so passionate about this. If we want to go to the next slide, one of the things that we are doing is we're going to mail a postcard to make sure to every member's home. And that's to make sure that we don't miss anybody. And we'll probably still miss someone doing that, but we think that good old US Post Office mail is probably a way that we can reach many age groups. And so Caitlin designed this postcard. And if you'll go to the next slide that shows the back of it, it is personalized for the temple. And Caitlin has said that if other congregations want to use this postcard, she will be happy to volunteer to personalize it with the name of the congregation and whatever type you want on it, whatever copy you want on it. So we can get out of that now. I can share this whole graphics package with you, and also give you the name of the printer that we used that we thought was a good price, and they'll be familiar with it. So that will make it easy to do.
Can I interrupt just 1 second? We're getting a lot of questions and comments in the chat, and so I want to make sure that I can get those to you. So one question is there going to be an article in the Observer announcing your program? And then somebody else suggested that NowGen would be a good resource as well for reaching out to people.
Great. Well, we will certainly be reaching out to the Observer. This is a campaign that is fluid. We're going to be developing new tactics every week, every day that we can think of. And we love your comments and suggestions because we're not going to think of everything, and you're going to have better ideas than we do probably in many cases. So yes, thank you for those, and keep them coming. And we'll be sharing our email addresses after this. And so if you've got ideas, please send them along. We want them.
I also want to mention, I'm really grateful that Erin Coleman was able to jump on this call, and she asked if it could be personalized for Hadassah and NCJW, and the answer is absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, Caitlin, she's not Jewish, but she's a young activist, and she just was so enthused that we were doing this that she said, listen, as an incentive for other people to get on the bandwagon, I'll volunteer to personalize it. So absolutely, the answer is yes.
And
Any other questions there?
if there's not a budget for a postcard, like for example, I don't know what Hadassah's budget is, but you can still use the image and send it in through your social media and your emails.
Yeah. And just so you know, I think it cost us a little over $250 to print 1,000 postcards. Okay. Any other questions there, Leslie?
Not right now, I don't think.
Okay. So you'll have the graphics package if you want to use it. We are also sending everybody who wants to sign the pledge card to our templehub.org website. That is a website that the temple developed during COVID to keep people posted about what is happening. And so on that website, there is a page dedicated to voting. And it will not only have the electronic postcard, but if you want to register to vote, there'll be a link for that. There's a link to get your absentee ballot. There is a link, or there will be the voting deadlines, things like that. We haven't quite finished that website yet, but we're getting very close. Just so that's another way that we are informing people about all the important voting information. So the next thing I'm going to have Renee talk about, Renee Kastman, is something that I just think is one of the most exciting and things that we're doing, and because it is geared towards the people who are 18 to 25, and maybe it's their first time voting. And so we're having this, where it's a webinar. We don't have a title for it yet, but it's going to be held on September 15th, and it's created by young people for young people. So Renee, you want to talk about that?
Sure. We are very, very excited about this. Beyond working with other congregations, we also wanted to make this an interfaith campaign. So we reached out to Sabina, who actually we saw on here, from the American Muslim Advisory Council, to see if we could pair up some young congregants with some young people from the Muslim community to organize this teaching webinar on what to expect. This is geared towards young voters, very much towards first-time voters, because what we're finding is there's an obstacle to voting. They don't know what to expect when they walk in during COVID. They don't know what's on the ballot. And we have found that's even true for older voters. They don't know who they're voting for or what the issues are they're voting on. So these are the types of things we're going to cover in this webinar. We're very excited. We've pulled in two congregants, Hannah Kornfeld and Steve Venick from the temple, and we've matched them up with peers their age from the Muslim community. And we're publicizing this to the public. This is going to be open beyond temple members, beyond the Jewish congregations in town. So if anyone has suggestions on who else we might open this up to, we would love to have anyone who is a young voter or first-time voter of any age that wants to know what they're walking into when they walk into the polls this year. as Pat said, even when turnout was at a record high for this age group, it was only at 36%. And we really think we can do better. And we can't reach these people at Temple right now. People aren't coming to Temple. And even at the best of times, they don't always show up for services. So we think this webinar Zoom talk is going to be one way to reach out. Any comments, any names of organizations, just put it in the chat. We'll take a look at it. And we hope to see some young people in your circle of friends on the 15th. That's Tuesday, September 15th, 7 o'clock, and that will be on the Temple Hub.
Great.
Renee, thank you so much for sharing that. And I do have some, I will share some other thoughts on ways to engage some of our younger adults, both within the Jewish community and the greater community. If I can indulge everyone for just a moment, I wanted to introduce Senator Stephen Dickerson, who has taken a few moments of his time to join us. He is a citizen legislator and is currently working as a doctor and has just a few minutes to share with us. He was going to share with us some of how the state legislature concluded the other day, and then we'll come back around to questions and comments regarding the voter. So thank you for indulging me on that. And please, Senator Dickerson, feel free to unmute yourself and share your thoughts on the close of the state legislature.
I'm actually, pardon me, I'm stepping into a quieter room. Hope everybody's not getting seasick there watching me, but I stepped into the supply cabinet. So we had an extraordinary session. There we go, I'm getting comfortable, where we met for 3 days and took up some bills over the last few days. We concluded 2 nights ago. One of them, very non-controversial, had to do with telemedicine. Obviously, a lot of us are concerned as a physician, as a provider, and also as a patient about safety going into doctor's offices, large groups of people. And so what this did was sought payment parity between in-office and virtual appointments. And the governor had actually put that as part of an executive order that had been enforced, but we went ahead and brought it into the code. Second one was a liability reform bill. And this was basically trying to do away with nuisance lawsuits. There are a lot of concerns with folks who may end up going to work, or customers or clients who may go into place of business, whether they might get exposed. And you know, if a business owner is doing everything feasible to protect employees and to protect customers and clients, then it was the legislature's thought, and I supported the bill, that they should have some level of immunity. This obviously is a rapidly developing area. I wanted to take some effort to protect them. The other 2 bills continue on sort of a theme that a lot of the folks in the legislature have pursued. One of them specifically had to do with autonomous zones. It did not call it that in the legislature because autonomous zones is not defined in the code. But if a government entity chooses to allow an autonomous zone, that is an area where law enforcement, fire, and whatnot may not go in, then that government entity will bear some liability or responsibility for any bodily injury or property damage that occurs. And that bill actually came out of left field. Nobody knew it was coming until the last minute. And that was a bit of a surprise. But the most controversial bill, the one that I voted against, had to do with what I would call sort of the criminalization of camping and First Amendment expression. In this bill, sort of a direct result of what's going on down at Legislative Plaza. And I had real reservations about this bill, and again, voted against it at every turn, and we can discuss the bill further. There were a lot of moving parts with the bill, frankly, but my concerns with it fell into a couple of different categories. And broadly speaking, civil liberties. I think this bill will have a chilling effect on First Amendment expression. And secondly, it actually is pretty bad on the criminal justice reform. A lot of Republicans, a lot of Democrats support criminal justice reform. Unfortunately, what we saw with this was some enhancement of some penalties so that things that had been misdemeanors are now felonies. In fact, there may be circumstances where people have significant jail time for doing the same things, such as camping out on state property in areas that are not designated. So that was a bill that I thought was pretty inappropriate. The governor has expressed some reservations about it, but I think he's actually still going to sign it. And then we had sort of the typical funding bill that came through also. So that's sort of what we did over the last 3 days. But I just want to applaud you all for your voter outreach efforts. Congressman Cooper and I have spent a good bit of time in the high schools around Nashville trying to register young people to vote. And when you all said that 36 or 38% of people in sort of the under 40 age group had voted, that's actually one of the higher numbers I'd heard. Some of our concerns, if you go back to the mayoral race, that was very, very sort of an exciting race, and it had all the different candidates as were Megan Barry and David Fox ended up facing off in the runoff. The numbers were even lower than that in terms of participation, and that was a pretty well publicized race. And you see numbers like that. We have a lot of opportunity to get young people to vote, and it's no time like the present to get them registered and get them to vote. So I'll be glad to answer any questions. I've got about 5 minutes where I have to be back in the operating room. So go ahead and hit me up with questions if you want to.
Yeah, so we do have a comment to thank you for voting against the bill to felonize the rights of citizens. Do you think there is any hope that pressure on the governor might work for him to not sign that bill?
At this juncture, I'm not optimistic, but actually what I am optimistic about is a couple of the folks that voted for the bill had real misgivings about the felony component. And they've expressed this to me before, during, and after the process. And essentially what they said was they liked a large chunk of the bill, and so they were going to vote for it and sort of hold their nose about the parts they didn't like. And specifically the felony, the escalation to the felony was something that a lot of folks from both sides of the aisle had significant reservations about. And so one of the folks, and I won't call him out by name because I don't want to get him in trouble with his constituents. One of the guys that would probably surprise you specifically said that he was going to bring a bill to remove the felony component of that and drop it back to a misdemeanor. Now, I'm not even sure it warrants a misdemeanor. I think people expressing their First Amendment rights, and whether they disagree with the state government, federal government, local government, that is what I think an intrinsic part of our society is the ability to push back against policies and laws that you don't like. So I think anything that chills the First Amendment is troubling to me. But I do appreciate the fact that some of the folks do want to sort of reel that back in. So I'm obviously I'd support that. That's going to be one of the funny things where if I'm in the state Senate in 2021, I will vote for that bill, which would make that a misdemeanor. Now, I don't, again, agree with anything that chills the First Amendment, but I think anything we can do to de-escalate the penalty would be a net asset for the state.
Another question that has come up a couple times that we've not been able to get a really clear answer on is part of our understanding is part of why the property taxes here needed to be raised was something to do with a rainy day fund and also the COVID funds. And so I wanted to know if you have any more information on how the state is planning to spend those COVID funds, and also what you understand about something called the rainy day fund.
Sure. So that's a couple of questions wrapped into one. And I have to admit, I got an email literally this morning when I was walking to the operating room that dealt with the funding of some of the CARES Act and the distribution of some of the money. And I haven't had a chance to read it because I literally was in the operating room from 30 until about 15 minutes ago. I will be glad to get that and forward it to you.
Thank you.
It actually breaks it down into some general categories, but I didn't really get a chance to digest that. So as far as the tax, the local proposed tax or property tax increase, I'm unaware that is tied directly to any of the COVID issues or the rainy day fund. I'll look into that, but I'm unaware of any sort of tie that might have. As far as the rainy day fund goes, and I think our state has been fiscally very responsible. We have a rainy day fund. We don't have debt. I mean, it's something that people talk about all the time. They compare us to states like Illinois, where they've got significant debt going into this. So we've got a significant rainy day fund, which is hundreds of millions of dollars. Our budget deficit in 2021 is suspected or is anticipated being about $1 billion. And so we've got a rainy day fund and a deficit upcoming. So how do you navigate through that? Statutorily, with the rainy day fund, we can't start spending it until we have sort of exhausted all other avenues on the state level. And I can give you an example. In this fiscal year, we ended up being about $500 million short because of the interruption to our tax flow from sales tax and franchise and excise tax. And a lot of the different departments and the universities, for example, have funds that they keep that sort of set aside for long-term projects for building. Sorry, and of course, my phone now says it's about to run out of battery. That's why I was in the operating room. I had it plugged into near my anesthesia machine. And so there was some money they already had set aside that was not earmarked specifically for operating expenses this year. We actually patched our budget shortfall this year in large part by taking those funds and bringing them back into the general fund. We have, I think by the end of this year, we'll have exhausted all that money. And I think we will probably dip into the rainy day fund. But even in the best of circumstances, it will not cover our budget deficit for next year unless something significantly changes. So we're going to be faced with $1 billion deficit and a rainy day fund that's several $100 million in size. And so we're going to have to make some hard decisions in 2021 about how to span that shortfall.
All right. Thank you for taking time out of
Sure.
your very busy day. I know you need to get back.
Yeah.
Thank you. And I can follow up with you on some of those details and share them out.
I'll get those to you. If you'll send me a text, since I
Sure.
look back in, I might forget. Send me a text or an email, and I'll get you whatever information I have.
All right. Thank you very much for joining us briefly. Thank you. And Leslie, I'll turn it back over to you at this point. Thank you, Senator Dickerson.
So one thing that I was going to ask him, but Debbie might know actually, is are we out of time for a legislative solution to this absentee ballot thing for the fall? Is there anything else? Okay, so it's
The
time.
short answer is yes. The legislature is done for the season, and they're not going to reconvene until January with new members. So we have no legislative solution, and an awful lot of the issues that we would love to address, such as how you fix the absentee ballot issues and how you allow for drop boxes and a lot of those issues all require change in the Tennessee code, which means the legislature has to address them.
All right. I know that Congregation Micah is also launching something, and Brandy is on the call. Brandy, do you want to tell us just briefly what Micah has planned? I think.
Hi. Yes. So we are actually kind of going along with what the temple is doing, and we are launching our campaign also on the 21st. And so we've actually used a couple materials. Thank you to all of you for providing those. And we'll include kind of like what they have with their postcard, except for it will be kind of postcard size, and it's kind of an announcement that we are going to be putting in our High Holy Day gift bags. Our congregation will be coming to a pickup parade on September 13th to get all of their High Holy Day material, since everything will be online, and that will be included in those bags. We've also launched a website page dedicated to voting, and it has a plethora of information about are you eligible for absentee voting, how to apply for your absentee ballot, what are the most important dates to keep in mind as far as registering for an absentee ballot and having that information in, as well as general information about the election and when and where you need to vote. So we have that available, and then we also have linked to that an actual pledge form that they can complete online as well. And I sent that out to our social action team yesterday with just a couple of suggestions on how we can make it even better. So I've received those back this morning. I'm actually working on it right now as I'm talking to you guys or listening to you guys with just some updates on that for people to tell us, if they're planning to vote in person or by absentee ballot. Also to check on their registration and make sure it's valid, and there's links underneath that so they can just click directly on that, and it'll open another page so they can see if everything is valid and still up to date. And there's also volunteer opportunities, so if they actually want to help transport people to the polls, we're asking if they're able to do that and how many people they can take. So we are directing people through all this information that if they need assistance getting to the polls, we will connect those persons so that no one is left out and everybody can get where they need to get. Also, you guys might know that in the past, Uber and Lyft have offered free transportation to the polls. So I'm kind of keeping my eye out for that. I haven't seen anything about that quite yet. So if anybody has any information about that, I'd love to hear anything that you have. But we're going to be posting that as well if that does so happen to be available. So that's what we're working on now. We also have a letter that will go specifically out to younger voters with if this is your first time voting or if you haven't voted before, here's resources that you could use to help you, as well as we're going to do an outreach to older voters as well, because if some of them do not have that transportation ability, we want to let them know that there are people there available to help them. So we're working on that as well. And then we are also working on 3 different e-blasts that will go out to the entire congregation. As the temple mentioned, they're trying to do 3 points of contact, and we're trying to push that as well. So we'll have our first e-blast to announce the actual challenge on the 21st that will go out that will be from the rabbis directly. And then we also have other points of contact via social media. We had a young gentleman who was on the call with our social action team that we talked with him specifically because he is in the younger range, and asked him, as a young voter, what he thinks would be most impactful to persons of his age, especially for those who don't find it necessary or important to participate in voting. And so we are doing some research and trying to find some very specific outreach materials that we can use directly for those students. And we're hopefully going to be using a lot of our story on the Rabbis page on Facebook and Twitter. And we're actually looking at developing a TikTok page for Congregation Micah, because we've heard that those are really the ways to really reach out to that younger group, and trying to be creative in ways that we can say, hey, this is important that you get involved in, maybe using some, important information, because as you know, Congress is, voting on or talking about student loans. So we're looking at specific issues that adhere specifically to them that will encourage them to say, hey, I didn't really think about that before, but that directly affects me and maybe I should get involved.
Randy, sorry to interrupt. Thank you so much. And I think you maybe heard that Renee, they're also reaching out. So there may be some work you can do with Renee and their work with younger voters. But I do want to turn it back to Denise and Pat for their presentation. I apologize for that, for Senator Dickerson needing to jump in the middle, but I want to make sure we leave time for their presentation.
Yeah, no problem. I mean, that was great to hear from him, and it was great to hear from Brandy. I love all those things you all are doing. You just gave us some great ideas, so we will, as we have been, staying in close touch so that we can share those ideas. And we were really almost finished. I think the last thing that I wanted to mention was that we want to also get in contact with the people, the young kids who are not of voting age, and ask them to help us get their parents to sign the pledge and vote. And one of the ways that we're going to be doing that is the clergy will have a caravan the end of August, the beginning of September, going to the houses of the people that have kids in religious school. And so one of their homework assignments will be to get their parents to sign that pledge card. We're coming up with some different ways to also reach get the kids to reach their parents. And we talked with Rabbi Schulman about that a couple days ago. And so we're brainstorming some ideas. All of that to say, as I mentioned before, this is a very fluid campaign, and we're just running and gunning, if you will, and whatever we think of, we're doing. So please, if you want to be involved, we would love for you to be involved. Denise is going to close it out with how to do that after we give you this short, little inspiring video. All right, take it away, video, Makala.
Raise a glass to freedom, something they can never take away. No matter what they tell you, let's have another round tonight. Raise a glass to the four of us. Tomorrow there'll be more of us. telling the story of tonight. Let's have another round. Raise a glass.
So Denise,
Denise, did you have anything else?
Basically, I think what would be really good, since there's so many different people on this call representing different congregations and organizations, Pat and Renee and I should put our email address in the chat, and please contact us. Love to have a conversation, figure out, what would be helpful to make you be able to hit the ground running, and with a special emphasis on targeting who some of the young people are that you're affiliated with in your organizations. So I'm very excited. Brandy, I love your ideas. I can't wait to see the TikTok. And
Lori,
just how to do that.
so, and don't forget, after you hang up, please verify your voter registration. Okay. So
One thing, a lot of people on the call may not know what the RAC is, and I think this idea originated from them, the Religious Action Center. So could one of you talk briefly about RAC?
Denise, you want to do that?
no. I think Renee is probably more familiar with it.
I got involved through our social justice committee at the temple. One of our members, Martin Sir, told me to take a look that they were doing this civic engagement initiative. And they do a lot of work in social justice and issues across the country. And it's a way to connect with congregations all across the country, reform congregations, and see what they're up to. And they will guide you through the process. We took their advice and adapted it to our congregation. I think what we came up with was really innovative and will work best for our congregation. But it's a really wonderful way to connect with congregations across the country and see what they're doing. This is not the only thing they're working on, but this is the program we decided to become a part of right now. And that's the Religious Action Center of Reform Judaism.
Great. Does anyone else have final questions around the voting campaign? You can post them in the chat, or at this point, you could probably just unmute yourself and ask directly if you'd like.
I just want to offer that if anyone has trouble, taking these email addresses from the chat, anyone who messages me on this, I can very happily connect you with anyone working on this campaign. So if you don't get the emails from the chat, please feel free to just message me at some point and I'll help you connect.
All right, great. It looks like no one has any final questions. So thank you to all four of you for joining us, and Brandy also for talking to us about Temple. And Deborah, you can thank Senator Dickerson for dropping in and giving us a legislative update.
Do we have any comments from Debbie? I think there was a question about the
Sarah, yeah.
Yeah, there was a question in the chat from Sarah.
I think I answered Sarah's question, which was, is there a workaround for first-time voters, if they want to vote absentee? And the answer is yes, that if you vote in person at the election commission with an election commission officer, you are eligible to vote absentee.
There's another question from Tina. Does anyone know how voting will look for seniors in residential settings for the election?
You mean like assisted living or places like that? It's a little complicated, Tina, because the arrangement had been that that the election commission would go inside, and now they're not going to be able to go inside. So they do have some protocols worked out, and that's probably a longer conversation than we have time for in the last 2 minutes. But I'd be happy to talk to you about it. Okay.
And just one last thing, somebody had posted earlier, I think it was Ricky. Do you know if people are registering for their absentee ballots already for November, when can they expect to receive them?
Middle of September, first week, second week of September.
Okay. Right.
I have a quick question on that. And is it true that those there will be literally no physical places to drop off mail-in? Like, I know in some places, because of the concern about slow mail, that there are some physical places. Is that true here in Davidson County? Is there a place, or
So-
those have to go back in the mail?
So here's the answer, which is something that is, what should we say? It's a workaround that they did in August and that they will continue to do in Davidson County. It may look different in other counties. The post office has agreed that if you drop mail off, a stamped absentee ballot, at the main post office that's next to the Frisk Museum, that's the same post office that the Election Commission uses. So you can even drop it off on the day of the election, and they will make sure it gets to the Election Commission post office box and will count as mailed ballot. So, and you need to also ask them to hand cancel it, because that's also important to verify that it got there. So this is only for that post office. You cannot take it to the Election Commission directly, and you definitely can't take it to a polling location.
Thank you for that clarification. I appreciate that. And we will do our best to publicize. Yes, Tina, you're right. I will publicize that because, like I said, I had heard that there was no way to do that. So thank you for that information. We will get that out because I know that there's a lot of concern about the ballot not getting back in time. All right, thank you. We'll make sure that we do our best to get that out to everyone. Any
Right.
other
Sounds
last
like
questions?
all-
Otherwise, I'll give updates on our next couple of weeks, who to expect.
Any final questions? The one thing I think that's important going forward is a lot of people are working on this. And so one of the roles hopefully we can fulfill is pooling that information and plugging people into each other so that everybody knows what's going on and we're all working together. Next week, I think our topic is going to be Medicaid expansion.
Actually, next week we will be hearing from Stephen Klein, who is the Government Affairs Director for the Jewish Federations of North America. He'll be giving us an update on the status of the federal legislation. I had been optimistic when I scheduled him that there would be the next piece of federal legislation for him to share, but he will at least be able to share where things stand on the federal level in terms of legislation to deal with the various issues related to COVID-19. And then, Leslie, you're correct, the week after that, we will be joined by Sally Smallwood and Representative Ron Travis. Sally is with the Coalition for Strong Tennessee, and it's a bipartisan effort for better solutions for comprehensive Tennessee healthcare coverage. And Representative Travis is the representative from Dayton, Tennessee, a Republican in the state legislature, who has been very supportive of the legislature beginning to continue to have conversations, but to really push for better opportunities for health coverage in Tennessee.
Great. Thank you again to Denise, Debbie, Renee, and Pat for joining us today. It's a great presentation. And also to everyone else for joining us on the call. And Shabbat Shalom. We will see you next week.
Great job, everyone. Thank you so much. Shabbat Shalom. Thank